Ever since owning the Fuji X100V, I've noticed my photography has changed a little bit. It's changed in a positive way. And I think it's changed my ability to notice the smaller details and different compositions. I think whether you change gear, change location, change your environment, change your approach, all of these little things or big things are going to change your photography. And I've noticed it since owning the Fuji. I've noticed my ability to notice and just the things I like taking photos of are a little bit different when I pick this camera up. In this video, I want to talk about my camera settings, I want to talk about the setup and how I use the Fuji X100V, and then we'll go on a bit of a photo walk and just take some photos. No agenda, but just see what we can find and see what looks cool. Let's kick things off and talk about the physical attributes. Now, I did add a lens hood. I will put the link in the description. This obviously just helps with a little bit of sun glare and for aesthetics because look at it, it looks sick. And then I did also buy a red button. Now, I did fall into the trap of hipster mode. When someone said, Mike, you need to put a red button on top of the camera, it'll look good, I was like, yeah, why not? But then I did a little bit of research and a few people messaged me saying this could damage the shutter because there's a little bit of leverage when pressing the red shutter button down. So you're actually just better off not having that extra height and just using the regular shutter button. And if for any reason I would or could damage the camera, then I obviously want to avoid it. So I took the red button off. It didn't even last an hour. The next thing I bought was this leather strap. Now, the regular black Fuji strap is obviously good enough, but I wanted to look more hipster. Obviously, I'm carrying around a Fuji, I want to look the part. So I went on Etsy, got a leather strap, and boom. It does the job of looking cool and carrying the camera around, so yeah. So that's pretty much the physical attributes that I've changed or added, just the lens hood and the leather strap. Almost every single photo I've taken with the Fuji, I've used aperture priority, so auto ISO, auto shutter speed, and then f4 or f5.6. I think anywhere between f4 and f8 seems to be a good focus range when you're out doing street photography, especially because the things I'm looking for with the Fuji are just very simple, very everyday moments. I might be noticing a pop of light or a cool composition. I just want to keep it simple and point the camera up, snap away. I don't want to worry about whether I've got the depth of field correct, or I don't want some crazy bokeh. I don't want to worry about the shutter speed and ISO. So I'm happy for the camera to decide what the ISO and shutter speed will be when I decide the f4, f5.6, f8, depending on the lighting that day. I do then have the auto ISO settings on a minimum of 1/80th of a shutter speed, just so there's not some crazy motion blur, but if there needs to be a little bit of motion blur, then so be it. So 1/80th is okay. And then a minimum ISO of 160 and a max ISO of 3200. This seems to be pretty much perfect for daytime stuff. Again, aperture priority is something that I wouldn't use if I was out shooting with my Canon R6, which I'm filming with now. I would go full manual, pretty much with any other camera that I've used, but with the Fuji, I found myself just wanting to keep things really simple, so aperture priority it is. Moving on to custom buttons, which I have none of them set, so I realise this might not be the most efficient way of shooting, and there might be some Fuji experts watching this thinking, Mike, you're missing out on some big opportunities here, but the camera seems to work fine without me having to change any major buttons. I don't have any back button focus or anything. It's really very simple, and the buttons themselves are pretty much exactly how they are when I took the camera out of the box. Moving on to my focus settings, I use single point focus combined with a metering mode of center weighted. When shooting with the Fuji, I tend to be quite deliberate and slow with my photography. I don't really find myself in rushed situations where I need to be quick and speedy. If that was the case, I don't think single point would be the most effective way of shooting. Unless you got used to it, everyone's different and everyone uses cameras differently. But with single point focus, I point my camera up at the area or the subject of the composition, and then I find the area that is the most important to focus on, half press with the shutter, and then I can move the camera around to recompose or reframe the image. And I find that center weighted seems to match pretty well with what I'm focusing on with single point. I've noticed with other metering modes, it sometimes can't get the highlights and the shadows correct, or it's correct in the camera's point of view, but it's not correct to how I want the photo to look. So in my experience, using single point focus combined with center weighted metering mode seems to be able to get the best composition, and the camera seems to be able to find the look and the exposure that I'm after, and then yeah, the focus is on me. Like I said, I normally find the thing I want most in focus, which is probably in the center of the frame anyway. I will half press to get that focus, and then I can recompose. I think some people call it fishing, the focus fishing. I personally find that the focus settings you use, the metering modes, and the focus areas, all that kind of stuff, can actually dramatically change the type of photos you take. So from the photos I've been taking with the Fuji, single point, center weighted metering, all that seems to work perfectly. So they're my focus settings. I have been shooting in fine and raw, so I do get a JPEG version and a raw file. I used to only shoot in raw when I was shooting with my Canon R6, for example, and if I'm doing anything professional, then I only shoot in raw, to be fair. But the Fuji X100V has kind of ended up being my everyday camera, and for everyday situations you don't need raw files for everything, so I think it's nice to just use the JPEGs. If the JPEG looks great straight out of the Fuji, which 90% of the time it does, I just send it to my phone and then I can share it on Instagram, share it on Twitter, etc, etc. So I've really enjoyed shooting in fine. I think the workflow of JPEGs only is really fun, really easy to use. However, I have been keeping all of the raw files in case I want to edit them myself. So I still find that some of the JPEGs are not perfect and I want to go in and enhance it, change it, and I can do that if I keep the raw file. So yeah, shooting in fine and raw seems to be what I've been working with so far. So I have been testing a lot of different Fuji recipes and film simulations. I've been going on Fuji Weekly, having a look at what I like and then trying them out. The photos you're about to see in this video are taken with a recipe called Bright Summer, which I found on Fuji Weekly, so I'll link that in the description so you can check out the blog and copy the settings yourself. Alright, that's enough rambling. Let's get outside, let's take some photos, grab some popcorn, make a cup of tea or whatever you want to do. Just sit back, relax and enjoy this photo walk. bye.